There's a stirring in the atmosphere that no one can quite explain with natural language. It's a vibration felt deep within the spirit of those who have been sensitive enough to perceive what isn't being said in the noise of the world. It's not something you'll catch on the evening news or read in a headline. It's a sound that comes from heaven, a divine pulse that beats in rhythm with eternity's plan. And those with eyes to see and ears to hear are sensing it like a faint but steady drumbeat growing louder by the day. The world continues to spin in its cycle of distraction, entertainment, and trivial pursuits. But in the spirit realm, heaven is sending out a summons. God is calling His people to prepare not casually, not when it's convenient, not when the schedule clears, but now. Because there is an urgency that cannot be ignored, a final divine agenda setting itself into motion, and to be misaligned now is to be lost in the moment when heaven moves. Spiritual preparation isn't about religious activity or ceremonial appearances. It's not about how well one can quote scripture or the titles one holds in front of their name. It has nothing to do with outward show and everything to do with inward surrender. God isn't looking for polished perfection or staged faith. He's looking for hearts fully turned toward Him, for spirits willing to be led without argument, for lives that say yes even when the instructions defy comfort and tradition. The agenda of heaven does not wait for anyone to feel ready. It does not bend to convenience. When God's timing moves, it moves, and those who have spent time aligning themselves in the secret place will find themselves in step with destiny, while others scramble to understand what they missed. This is not a casual call to faith. This is an urgent command to position oneself for what heaven is about to release and permit in the earth. The evidence of divine movement is everywhere for those willing to see it. The ground has been trembling under the weight of spiritual warfare for years now. Unprecedented events, unexplainable disruptions, and an increase in the spiritual hunger of those who can no longer be satisfied with surface-level religion. All of it points to a greater unfolding plan. And the danger lies in being lulled to sleep by the routines of life while eternity shouts in the background. God's final divine agenda requires readiness, because those caught off guard will find themselves swept away in the confusion of unprepared souls. The alignment God seeks is total. It demands the removal of divided loyalties and compromised convictions. It exposes the places where we've made peace with mediocrity and called it contentment. It confronts the unaddressed areas of disobedience we hoped would go unnoticed. In this hour, partial submission won't suffice. Half-hearted pursuit will not hold up under the weight of what's coming. God is calling for a people who have made up their minds, who have chosen Him above everything else, who will follow without conditions or negotiations. Because the plan requires vessels who are clean, hearts that are pure, and spirits that are unshaken by the winds of cultural trends and political chaos. You don't need to be a prophet to recognize the signs. The earth groans, the nations rage. People's hearts are failing them for fear of what's coming. And still in the middle of this unrest, God is raising up a remnant, a people who have been in the shadows, hidden away from the applause of men, molded in the fires of private battles, and prepared for this precise moment. Their names aren't famous. Their faces aren't on billboards. But their prayers have moved mountains, and their faith has shifted atmospheres. These are the ones the agenda requires. Not the popular, but the prepared. Not the platform seekers, but the presence chasers. Preparation is costly. It will require leaving behind what's familiar, walking away from the comfortable patterns of yesterday, and letting go of the things you once thought you couldn't live without. It will expose attachments you didn't know had your heart. It will confront idols you never labeled as such. The divine agenda is weighty, and it refuses to share space with what's temporary, impure, or self-serving. The question isn't whether God is moving. The question is whether you'll be in position when He does. The urgency of this hour is not about fear. It's about awareness. It's about understanding the times and discerning the movements of heaven. It's about realizing that we have crossed over into a moment in history where neutrality is no longer an option. Silence is complicity. Hesitation is disobedience. To delay is to be left behind spiritually, even if you remain present physically. The gap between what is seen and what is unseen is closing fast, and those not prepared will find themselves overwhelmed by the speed at which heaven's plan manifests. This is the moment where the superficial cracks. The masks fall. The performance ends. The shaking of systems and the unraveling of old, dead traditions is not chaos. It is God removing what has kept his people bound and blinded. And those who are willing to let go, to release control, to forsake the applause of men for the approval of heaven, will find themselves caught up in the flow of his divine agenda, equipped to move in authority and power when the world around them collapses. There's an urgency because the window is not indefinite. There's an appointed time for everything under heaven, and while God is merciful, he is also just. The invitations have been sent out through dreams, visions, prophetic words, and unshakable gut-wrenching convictions. The warning signs have been clear, and now what remains is the response. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when it feels more convenient or less risky. Now, because the final plan of God is about to unfold in ways that will leave the unprepared scrambling, the lukewarm devastated, and the ready ones walking in unprecedented authority. Preparation isn't passive, it's active, it's intentional, it's uncomfortable. It means fasting when you'd rather eat. It means praying when you'd rather sleep. It means worshiping when your heart is heavy. It means severing ties with people who drain your spirit and environments that suffocate your faith. It means investing in the eternal while the world pressures you to prioritize the temporary. It's choosing obedience over understanding, sacrifice over safety, and surrender over stubbornness. There's no time left to debate whether or not God is serious. The evidence surrounds us. The unexplainable events, the shifting of economies, the exposure of hidden corruption, the natural disasters that defy reason, all signs pointing to a world out of alignment and a heaven ready to intervene. The divine agenda isn't about random acts of judgment or arbitrary displays of power. It's about restoring order. It's about reclaiming what belongs to the Creator. It's about ushering in a wave of glory that purifies, heals, and realigns the earth with heaven's original intent. To miss this is to miss your moment, and while grace is abundant, timing is sacred. Certain opportunities do not recycle. Certain doors close when seasons shift. And while God is merciful, he is also a God of order. When the cloud moves, those unprepared will find themselves stranded, stuck in old places, while the prepared occupy new territories. Spiritual preparation means packing up your faith, your courage, your obedience, and getting in step with the movement of God, even when it leads into unknown, uncomfortable, and uncharted places. The final divine agenda isn't a suggestion or a soft whisper. It's a decree from the throne room of heaven sent forth with the urgency of eternity itself. It carries the weight of ancient prophecies and the culmination of generations of prayers. It's what history has been groaning for, what the earth has been anticipating, and what the saints of old longed to see. And now it rests upon the shoulders of those alive in this pivotal moment. What will be done now shapes what happens next. The urgency is because lives hang in the balance. Not just yours, but the ones you're called to reach, to influence, to intercede for. Every act of obedience has ripple effects in the spirit. Every prayer prayed in secret dismantles demonic strongholds. Every fast breaks invisible chains. Every time you choose holiness over compromise, you disrupt the enemy's plan and accelerate heaven's. The divine agenda is not isolated. It is interconnected. Your preparation affects your household, your community, your bloodline, and the generations that will come after you. The urgency is because darkness does not sleep. It works overtime, seeking to distract, discourage, and derail those on the cusp of breakthrough. It whispers lies wrapped in half-truths. It tempts with what seems harmless but is deadly to destiny. It thrives in spiritual laziness and compromises disguised as balance. And the only defense is a life anchored in unwavering commitment to God's voice. This is not the hour for diluted faith or second-hand revelation. You must hear God for yourself. You must know his presence intimately. You must be able to discern the counterfeit from the authentic, the temporary thrill from the eternal truth. The urgency is because heaven is ready to release what eyes have not seen and ears have not heard, but it won't fall upon unprepared ground. The oil will not be wasted on those who refuse to carry it with honor. The mantle will not rest upon shoulders untrained in humility and discipline. The glory will not dwell in places contaminated by pride, competition, or rebellion. The divine agenda requires a remnant set apart not by man's standard, but by heaven's decree. This is your call to be counted among them, to rise from the ashes of old failures and regrets, to shake off the complacency that dulled your hunger, to break the agreements you made with mediocrity, to silence the voices that convinced you you weren't enough, too broken, too late. The final divine agenda is not for the flawless, but for the willing, not for the famous, but for the faithful, not for the perfect, but for the persistent. The urgency is clear. The clock is moving. The heavens are watching, and the earth awaits. Will you be found prepared? Will you have trimmed your lamp, kept your oil, stayed in the secret place, guarded your heart, and remained in position? Will you be ready when heaven's agenda interrupts earth's plans? Because it will. And when it does, those who prepared will lead, and those who did not will follow or fall. The time is now. The call is clear. The urgency is real. Prepare, there comes a time in every generation when the invisible world speaks louder than the visible. A moment when the air itself feels charged with meaning, and the ordinary occurrences of life become messages to those wise enough to perceive their significance. This is one of those moments. The world spins on in its routine, while in the unseen something ancient is stirring. The signs are not concealed, but few are paying attention. The earth, the nations, the systems of men, they are all signaling a prophetic shift, one long spoken of, one prepared for by those with discerning spirits, but one ignored by the masses content to sleepwalk through history. The signs of the times are not simply random coincidences or natural cycles repeating themselves. They are divinely orchestrated markers placed along the road of human existence to announce the nearing of significant prophetic moments. For those trained to read them, they serve as warnings and confirmations, as whispers from eternity breaking into time, as God's way of signaling that heaven is leaning closer and the stage of the earth is being set for what was spoken long before we arrived. You can feel it when the moral fabric of societies begins to fray, when the things once called evil are now celebrated, and the things once sacred are mocked. You can sense it when nations rage and alliances shift in unpredictable, unprecedented ways. You recognize it when the weather itself seems to rebel against expectation, when storms appear out of nowhere and natural disasters confound those who claim to understand them. The created world testifies to the Creator's displeasure, and yet humanity rushes on, intoxicated by its own illusions of control. The prophetic shift isn't coming, it's already here. And for those paying attention, the evidence is undeniable. Prophetic voices that once spoke in isolation are now speaking in unison. Dreams and visions once dismissed as imagination are recurring across the earth in different languages and cultures, confirming what the ancient text declared long ago. The old boundaries are being shaken. The ground beneath traditions is cracking. The veil between the natural and the spiritual is thinning, and what was hidden is being exposed. Recognizing the signs requires more than casual observation. It demands spiritual discernment, the ability to see beneath the surface and hear what is not being said aloud. It requires turning down the noise of the culture and leaning into the quiet places where God still speaks. The signs were never meant to terrify, but to prepare. They serve as reminders that though the world seems chaotic, nothing happens without the permission or purpose of heaven. Every shaking has a reason. Every disruption carries a message. When you see power structures collapse overnight, when economies built over generations crumble in days, when leaders fall and systems fail, it's not just political or financial, it's prophetic. When violence multiplies and hearts grow cold, when deception spreads faster than truth, it's not merely cultural decay, it's a sign of the times. When the earth itself groans through floods, fires, and famines, it's not only environmental, it's heaven declaring that time is short and eternity is pressing in. The prophetic shift reorders everything. What was once stable becomes unstable. What was predictable turns uncertain. Those with spiritual eyes understand that these are not random disruptions, but purposeful divine movements intended to wake the sleeping, warn the complacent, and call the prepared into position. The ancient scriptures spoke of days like this, of wars and rumors of wars, of pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places, of hearts failing for fear, of deception so strong that even the elect would be tempted. And here we are, not in theory but in reality. The signs are not subtle anymore. They are bold, unrelenting, and global. Yet the tragedy is how few recognize them for what they are. Many dismiss them as politics, weather, coincidence, or human nature, failing to discern the spiritual current beneath the surface of visible events. The prophetic shift doesn't always announce itself with dramatic declarations. Sometimes it moves quietly, subtly adjusting the course of nations, raising up the unexpected and removing those who seemed untouchable. Those who recognize the signs understand that nothing is by accident. The rise and fall of leaders, the sudden turn of public opinion, the unexpected shaking of established systems, all of it orchestrated as part of a larger divine narrative. To those watching with spiritual sensitivity, it's clear that we are nearing a moment foretold, a crossing over into a season where heaven's agenda will no longer be delayed. The signs announce that the window for preparation is closing, and those not ready will be left grasping for explanations in the aftermath. The prophetic shift reveals itself in the unrest you feel but can't explain, in the sudden, unrelenting hunger for deeper truth, in the loss of appetite for superficial entertainment and meaningless conversation, in the way your spirit seems to grieve over things you once tolerated. It's the Holy Spirit awakening His people, pulling them out of the noise and distractions, urging them to watch, to listen, and to prepare. Because what comes next will not allow for half-hearted faith or lukewarm allegiance. Recognizing the signs means paying attention to patterns. It means noting the increase in global unrest, the rise in moral confusion, the strange alignments between unlikely nations. It means watching how natural disasters cluster, how diseases mutate, how economies destabilize. It means understanding that behind the visible is an invisible war, and every physical event has a spiritual parallel. What happens on earth reflects what's already taking place in the heavens. The ancient texts spoke of signs in the sun, moon, and stars, of heavenly bodies moving in ways that signal shifts on the earth. And in this generation, even the heavens testify. Eclipses, blood moons, rare planetary alignments, all appearing not as cosmic accidents, but as timed announcements of prophetic events unfolding. The signs are layered, some loud, some quiet, but all pointing to a moment where everything as we know it will change. The danger is in the familiarity, in assuming that because life goes on, things remain as they were. But prophetic shifts don't wait for human permission. They move according to heaven's calendar, and those who miss the signs find themselves unprepared when the moment arrives. Recognizing the signs means remembering that God speaks through events, through nations, through nature, and through His people. That what seems like coincidence is often divine coordination. The prophetic shift can be seen in the exposure of corruption, in the fall of spiritual leaders who once seemed untouchable, in the cleansing of platforms, and the raising up of unknown voices prepared in obscurity. It's visible in the way traditional institutions lose influence while underground movements of faith and revival quietly rise. It's in the spiritual restlessness of a generation unwilling to be pacified by shallow religion or compromised leaders. It's in the birth of new assignments, the awakening of dormant callings, and the sudden clarity of purpose in those who for years felt directionless. You'll notice it in how conversations change, in how people once indifferent to spiritual matters now ask deep, urgent questions, in how long-standing relationships dissolve overnight while new, divinely connected alliances form, in the way old dreams die and new visions arrive with a sense of urgency that cannot be ignored. It's in the return of prodigals, the hunger for authenticity, the breaking of generational strongholds, and the boldness rising in those once timid and afraid. The prophetic shift shakes the foundations of everything built on human wisdom and pride. It humbles the proud, lifts the humble, and exalts what was despised. It repositions resources, redirects influence, and resets priorities. Those attuned to the signs are not surprised by the sudden changes because they've been watching, waiting, and discerning. They understand that the old is passing and the new is being established, not by human decision, but by divine decree. The signs of the times are found in the prayers rising from hidden places, in the weeping intercessors who cry out for nations, in the small gatherings where heaven invades earth in unexpected ways. They're in the strange favor granted to the faithful, in the doors opening where none existed, and in the inexplicable protection over those marked for divine assignments. They're in the spiritual warfare intensifying against specific families, regions, and individuals, signaling their significance in what heaven intends to release. Recognizing the signs means refusing to be distracted by what's trivial. It means setting your face like flint, prioritizing the eternal over the temporary, choosing obedience over comfort. It means being willing to look foolish to those blind to what's coming, to separate when others cling to what's familiar, to speak when silence is the easy choice. The prophetic shift separates wheat from tares, sheep from goats, the genuine from the counterfeit, and those who recognize the signs refuse to be caught on the wrong side of the divide. The world will call it chaos. Heaven calls it order. The world will see loss. Heaven will see harvest. The world will mourn systems collapsing, but heaven will celebrate the rise of a remnant unbound by the old and ready for the new. The prophetic shift is both judgment and mercy, both correction and invitation. It brings consequences for the unrepentant and unprecedented opportunity for the prepared. This is not a season to speculate or debate, but to discern and respond. The signs are clear, the warnings consistent, the invitations extended. The only question remaining is whether we will recognize them in time, because prophetic moments are not indefinite. They are windows that open for a season and then close, leaving those unprepared wishing they had acted while time permitted. Recognizing the signs of the times as indicators of a prophetic shift isn't about fear. It's about clarity. It's about understanding that while the earth shakes, heaven remains firm. That while nations tremble, God's promises stand. That while systems fail, the kingdom advances. It's about realizing that the shaking is necessary for the revealing. That what looks like loss is often heaven's way of making room for what must come next. Those who discern the signs align themselves accordingly. They don't wait for public consensus or external validation. They move when heaven moves. They obey when others hesitate. They prepare in secret for what will soon be undeniable in public. They weep for what others celebrate and celebrate what others dismiss. They see in part but trust the whole. And when the fullness of the prophetic shift manifests, they will not be surprised, for they have been watching and they understand the language of the signs. There comes a moment in every life where the weight of what you've been carrying demands to be acknowledged. A moment when your soul quietly whispers what your mind has been too afraid to admit, that everything around you cannot go where you're being called to go. The attachments you've held onto, the distractions you've entertained, and the dead places you've lingered in too long have become chains disguised as comforts. And if you don't release them, you will delay the very destiny your heart has secretly longed for. You can feel it even if you haven't fully named it. That heaviness when you wake up. That dullness in spaces where there was once excitement. That growing irritation around certain people whose conversation once entertained you, but now only leaves you empty. It's not just life being difficult. It's your spirit outgrowing the things that no longer serve you. It's heaven tugging at your soul, urging you to let go of what is safe but stagnant, what is familiar but unfruitful. You cannot walk into your future carrying the weight of what's meant to stay in your past. And distractions are the first thing the enemy will weaponize against you when he can't take your calling. If he can keep you busy, scattered, divided in your focus, he doesn't need to defeat you, because you'll defeat yourself. And distractions don't always look like chaos. Sometimes they wear the mask of good opportunities, prolonged conversations, endless scrolling, meaningless obligations, and constant access to people who drain you more than they build you. Life was never meant to be lived weighed down by everything you've picked up along the way. Some ties were meant to be temporary, some seasons designed to expire. But when we insist on carrying expired relationships, dead environments, and unaligned connections, we sabotage our own peace. You cannot hear the clarity of God's voice in a room full of unnecessary noise, and every distraction you tolerate is a delay you willingly accept. There are people in your life who are not enemies, but they are weights. They may be kind, but they are not assigned. They may mean well, but they are not aligned. The longer you keep them in proximity, the harder it will be to discern where your loyalty to them is compromising your obedience to God. Because every relationship costs you something, either your peace, your purpose, or your progress, and you must decide which you're willing to lose. Dead places are the environments you've outgrown but refuse to leave. that job you complain about but are too afraid to step away from, that circle of friends where your conversation no longer aligns, where you must shrink yourself to be accepted, where your silence feels like survival. Every time you revisit a dead place, you rob yourself of the energy needed for the spaces that await you. Nothing about your destiny is located in a place you have to force yourself to remain in. You are not called to blend in with people who have no intention of growing. And the reason your frustration has intensified is because your spirit recognizes what your comfort zone denies, that greater is available, but it requires separation. Separation from old mindsets, from familiar patterns, from the applause of people who benefit from your stagnation. Some people don't fear your failure. They fear your evolution because your growth exposes their unwillingness to move. Distractions often appear disguised as obligations. The need to please, to explain yourself, to overextend out of guilt, to stay connected to people simply because of history, not destiny. But your future requires a lighter load. Every distraction consumes the mental, emotional, and spiritual capacity you need to birth what's inside you. And the tragedy isn't the weight itself, it's that you've convinced yourself you can carry it all and still arrive on time. There is a price for peace, and it's called pruning. Letting go of the people you text out of habit, not necessity, the conversations that keep you circling the same old mountains, the environments that drain you the moment you arrive. You cannot heal in the same place that wounded you, and you cannot grow in soil that resents your roots expanding. It's not unkind to outgrow people, it's unhealthy to pretend you haven't. Toxic ties are not always abusive or dramatic. Sometimes they're subtle. The friend who always reminds you of your past but never celebrates your future. The relative who diminishes your achievements with backhanded compliments. The partner who only loves you in the version that's convenient for them. Every toxic connection takes a piece of your peace, a portion of your confidence, and a slice of your purpose until you no longer recognize yourself. You were never meant to carry relationships that God has already released you from. And it's not disloyal to leave people behind when your loyalty to them threatens your loyalty to yourself and to your assignment. Growth requires grief because you will mourn the version of you that tolerated less. You will grieve the comfort of old patterns and the predictability of familiar dysfunction. But what waits on the other side of that grief is freedom. Freedom to dream without the limitations of other people's insecurities. Freedom to wake up without the dread of dead places. Freedom to pursue what sets your soul on fire without explaining yourself to those who prefer you small and silent. But that freedom only comes when you purge what no longer belongs, and you must do it intentionally, unapologetically, and consistently. Dead places not only drain you, they define you. Stay too long in an environment beneath your purpose, and you'll begin to believe that's all you're worth. Stay connected to people who resent your growth, and you'll shrink to avoid confrontation. But you were created for more than surviving in spaces where your presence is tolerated but not valued. And the longer you linger, the more you betray the future version of yourself. This is the season to be ruthless about your peace, to protect your mental clarity like your life depends on it, because it does, to remove yourself from conversations that go nowhere, to say no without explanation, to release relationships that leave you feeling heavier, not lighter, to cancel assignments you never accepted in the first place, roles you were never meant to play, and responsibilities you picked up out of guilt, not calling. There is nothing noble about carrying what's killing you. There is nothing holy about entertaining what hinders you. The people who truly love you will celebrate your healing, even if it means they have less access to you. And those who guilt you for prioritizing your purpose were only committed to your proximity, not your progress. Learn to discern the difference. Your future requires intentional space. Space for clarity. Space for new alignments. Space for divine downloads. And you cannot receive what's meant for you if your hands are full of what you should have released. Distractions don't just steal time, they steal life. Because every moment you give to what doesn't feed you is a moment you'll never get back. And the harsh truth is, what you tolerate today becomes your normal tomorrow. It's time to audit your attachments, to ask yourself hard, honest questions. Why are you still entertaining conversations that leave you empty? Why are you loyal to places where you have to diminish your light? Why are you holding on to people who've shown you they have no capacity for where you're headed? Your life is too valuable, your assignment too urgent, your peace too precious to waste it on what won't sustain you. The version of you that will walk into the next level of destiny cannot look like the version who allowed dead weight to cling to them. You will either purge what no longer serves you or be buried by it. And while release may hurt, regret hurts more. Every moment you delay your deliverance is a moment your destiny waits in suspension. You were born to thrive, not survive in dead places, to create, not merely consume, to lead, not follow the familiar. But thriving requires shedding. Like a tree that releases dead leaves to make room for new growth, you must be willing to drop what no longer belongs. And you must do it without apology, because peace is not negotiable when purpose is at stake. Learn to be okay with losing people who never saw your value, to celebrate the closed doors that protected you from counterfeit opportunities, to honor the lessons learned in dead places, then leave without lingering, because your future will demand decisions your comfort cannot make, and you'll either move with the shift or mourn what could have been. The distractions, toxic ties, and dead places aren't just inconveniences, they're strategic attacks against your focus, your clarity, and your calling. Every minute spent in what drains you is a minute stolen from what builds you. And you are not called to be all things to all people, nor to fix what refuses to heal. You are called to be whole, and wholeness requires boundaries. It's time to choose yourself, not in selfishness, but in sacred self-preservation. Because when you are healthy, when you are clear, when you are walking light and free, you become a force for good in ways you can't while burdened. The world doesn't need more exhausted, distracted, depleted people. It needs those who are bold enough to purge, to prune, and to protect their peace at all costs. Your destiny deserves your full attention. Your purpose deserves your undivided heart. And you deserve a life that feels like freedom. But none of that happens accidentally. It requires intentional separation, daily discernment, and the courage to walk away from what no longer fits, even when it's familiar. You owe it to the future version of you to stop delaying their arrival by clinging to what no longer belongs. Because the life you want is on the other side of the things you're afraid to release, and you are capable of letting go, not just for you, but for everyone connected to your obedience. Because when you purge distractions, break toxic ties, and leave dead places, you don't just change your life, you shift the atmosphere for generations to come.